The glass doors slammed behind me as security rolled my nameplate into the rain. My board chairman had my office keycard in his hand, my company phone in his pocket, and my signature access to Bennett Mobility's autonomous freight permits locked inside a frozen account. Across the lobby screens, the morning news called it an emergency leadership removal. One rejected permit renewal could halt 3 airport cargo routes by sunrise. I still controlled the final DOT compliance token, but they thought firing me meant owning it. Cameras flashed through the revolving doors. My heels slipped on wet marble. Someone shouted my name. Then my former chief financial officer walked past me without stopping. That was when I understood they had not just taken the company. They had taken the room where people pretended to know me. Rain hit my face as I stepped onto 42nd Street. Cold. Sharp. Humiliating. My coat was still upstairs in my office. So was the framed photograph of my father standing beside the first delivery van we ever bought. I had built Bennett Mobility from a borrowed garage and a second-hand laptop. Now my own building security would not let me back inside to get a coat. A black sedan waited at the curb. Not for me anymore. For them. The driver avoided my eyes. I almost laughed, but the sound died in my throat. Phones kept rising around me. Reporters pushed questions through the rain. Victoria, did you mislead investors? Is it true the board voted unanimously? Are federal regulators involved? I walked past them. Each step felt louder than it should have. My phone buzzed once before the screen went black. Account suspended. Device disabled. Clean. Efficient. Corporate execution always looked polite from the outside. I reached the corner before I realized I had nowhere to go. The penthouse lease was tied to the company. My cards were tied to the company. My assistant, my driver, my calendar, my entire life had been tied to the company. A bus hissed at the curb and sprayed water across my shoes. I stood there under a broken awning, watching my reflection tremble in a puddle. For the first time in 20 years, nobody was waiting for my answer. That should have felt freeing. It did not. It felt like falling without making a sound. By nightfall, the city had already moved on. News vans vanished. The building lights stayed bright without me. I walked until my feet hurt. Rain soaked through my blouse. My stomach twisted from hunger, but pride kept me moving past restaurants with white tablecloths and polished windows. Then the streets changed. Glass towers gave way to gas stations, shuttered storefronts, and neon signs flickering in the rain. One sign glowed red through the dark. Mabel's Diner. Open all night. The bell above the door rang when I stepped inside. Warm air touched my skin. Coffee. Grease. Lemon cleaner. For 1 second, my body forgot I had lost everything. A little girl sat in the back booth coloring with a broken red crayon. Behind the counter, a black man in a white apron looked up from wiping a mug. His eyes paused on my wet clothes. Not with pity. With attention. Rough night? He asked. I tried to answer. Nothing came out. The room tilted slightly. The neon sign blurred against the window. The last thing I saw was his hand reaching across the counter. Then the floor rushed closer. Warm coffee filled the air when my eyes opened. A ceiling fan turned slowly above me. Its blades clicked once every rotation. I blinked and found myself sitting in a booth near the back of the diner. A folded towel rested beneath my head. My wet coat was gone. So were my shoes. Panic flashed through me. Then I saw them drying beside a small space heater. The black waiter stood behind the counter pouring coffee into a thick white mug. The little girl with the red crayon looked up from her coloring book. She smiled first. That surprised me. Most people recognized me before they smiled. You fainted, she said. Dad caught you. Her voice was matter-of-fact. No drama. No judgment. I looked toward the waiter. He shrugged. You looked like you needed a chair more than a sidewalk. A few customers laughed quietly into their coffee cups. Heat rose into my face. Not from embarrassment this time. From the mug he placed in front of me. Fresh coffee. Real cream. No questions attached. I wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth felt almost painful. How much do I owe you? I asked. He glanced at the register. Then at me. Tonight? Nothing. I reached for my purse automatically. My stomach dropped. The cards inside were useless. He noticed. He said nothing. That silence carried more kindness than sympathy ever could. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Neon light painted red reflections across the glass. Somewhere in the kitchen, bacon crackled on a grill. The diner felt small. Safe. Almost hidden from the rest of the city. A dangerous feeling. I had spent 20 years believing safety came from control. Yet none of my control had survived the day. The little girl returned to her coloring book. I watched her draw a house with a bright yellow roof. A few moments later, the waiter carried a plate toward an elderly couple. He moved efficiently. Calmly. No wasted motion. No performance. Something about him felt different. Not better. Just different. Then the front door opened. A truck driver stepped inside, dripping rainwater onto the floor. Evening, Marcus, he called. Marcus. The waiter nodded. Coffee's fresh. The driver grinned. Best news I heard all day. The exchange lasted 2 seconds. Yet somehow it felt genuine. Real. I could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to me without wanting something. Another uncomfortable realization settled over me. Marcus returned to the counter. His daughter held up her drawing. What do you think? She asked. Marcus studied it seriously. Not pretending. Actually studying it. I think the roof needs another window. Her face lit up immediately. She grabbed the red crayon again. The moment lasted only seconds. Still, I found myself watching. A father. A daughter. A conversation so ordinary it felt foreign. My phone had not rung once since afternoon. No assistant. No board member. No friend. The thought landed harder than I expected. I looked away toward the television hanging above the diner. A financial news channel played silently. My photograph appeared on the screen. Former CEO removed amid investigation. Customers glanced at the headline. Then at me. The room grew quieter. Marcus looked up too. For the first time. All night, our eyes met for more than a second. He had recognized me. Maybe from the beginning. Yet his expression never changed. No curiosity. No excitement. No judgment. Just calm observation. That unsettled me more than the headline. Then the little girl looked from the television to me. Her crayon froze halfway across the page. Dad, she said softly. Is that her? Marcus set down the coffee pot. His answer came after a brief pause. Finish your drawing, Lily. Lily looked back at me with wide eyes. And suddenly I realized this diner might not be as random as it seemed. The television continued flashing my photograph above the counter. Nobody said anything for several seconds. The diner seemed to shrink around me. Cups stopped clinking. Even the old ceiling fan felt louder. Lily looked from the screen to my face again. Her curiosity was honest. That somehow made it harder. Marcus picked up a dish towel and continued drying glasses. Calm. Unhurried. The news anchor's mouth moved silently beneath the headline. Former CEO removed amid investigation. I stared at the image. My image. Perfect hair. Expensive suit. Confident smile. The woman on the screen looked like a stranger. A customer finally cleared his throat and returned to his meal. Another reached for the sugar dispenser. The spell broke. Life moved again. Marcus walked over and switched channels without a word. A baseball game replaced the news. The room immediately felt lighter. I looked at him. You knew who I was? He folded the towel neatly. Yes. Since when? Since you walked through the door. His answer carried no drama. No accusation. Just fact. I waited for more. None came. That bothered me. Most people filled silence with opinions. Marcus seemed comfortable letting silence do its own work. Lily slid out of the booth and approached the counter with her drawing. "Can I show her?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "If she wants to see it." Lily handed me the page. A yellow house. A blue sky. A man and a little girl standing beside a dog. The drawing was simple. Happy. Certain. "It is beautiful," I said. Her face brightened immediately. "That is me and Dad." She pointed proudly. Then she tapped the empty space beside them. I ran out of room for the dog. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound surprised all three of us, including me. For a brief second, the weight on my chest loosened. Then my stomach growled loudly. Lily heard it. Marcus heard it too. I wished the floor would open beneath me. Marcus turned toward the grill. "You eaten today?" I hesitated. That was answer enough. 10 minutes later, a plate appeared in front of me. Eggs. Toast. Hash browns. Nothing fancy. The smell alone nearly made me emotional. I picked up the fork. "I cannot pay for this." Marcus poured another coffee. "Then do not worry about it tonight. That is not how business works." He leaned against the counter. "Maybe not your kind." The comment could have sounded sharp. Somehow it did not. It sounded honest. Another mini shock. He was not impressed by me. Not intimidated either. I ate slowly. Every bite reminded me how long it had been since food was simply food. No meetings. No negotiations. No investors. Just a meal. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Lily returned to her coloring book. Marcus moved between tables. The rhythm of the diner settled around me. Then the front door opened again. A man wearing a delivery uniform stepped inside carrying 2 boxes. "Evening, Marcus." "Evening, Sam." The delivery man nodded toward Lily. Then toward me. His eyes widened slightly in recognition. Before he could speak, Marcus shook his head once. A small movement. Easy to miss. Sam immediately changed the subject. They discussed weather and traffic instead. Nothing else. I noticed. Marcus had protected my privacy without asking permission. Another detail. Another piece that did not fit the picture I expected. Most people saw opportunity when they recognized me. Marcus saw a boundary. The delivery driver left a few minutes later. The diner grew quiet again. I glanced toward the clock above the register. Nearly midnight. Reality returned. I still had no home. No access to money. No plan for tomorrow. The realization settled heavily in my stomach. Marcus noticed me looking at the clock. He studied me for a moment. Then he asked a question that changed the direction of the entire night. "Where are you sleeping?" The question hung in the air between us. I looked down at the empty coffee cup. The answer should have been simple. It was not. "I have not figured that out yet," I said. Marcus nodded once. No surprise. No lecture. Just a nod. Outside, the rain had eased into a steady drizzle. The neon sign buzzed softly against the dark glass. Lily glanced up from her coloring book. "Do you have family?" she asked. Marcus gave her a look. Not angry. Just reminding her about boundaries. Lily lowered her eyes immediately. "Sorry." I surprised myself by answering anyway. "Not nearby." The truth felt heavier than I expected. Marcus refilled my coffee. The smell drifted upward with the steam. "There is a motel 2 blocks over," he said. "Cheap. Clean enough." I almost laughed. Clean enough. 24 hours earlier, I had been choosing between luxury hotels for a conference in Chicago. Now a roadside motel sounded like a strategy. Another uncomfortable thought followed. I could not pay for a motel room. My silence answered before I could speak. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. He seemed to notice everything. The clock ticked past midnight. A few customers paid their checks and left. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. The diner slowly emptied. Lily gathered her crayons into a small plastic box. She worked carefully, methodically, like she had done it 1,000 times. Marcus watched her for a moment. Then he turned back toward me. You can stay until we close. I do not want to be a problem. You are sitting in a booth drinking coffee. His expression remained neutral. I have handled worse problems. That earned a small smile from me. Another one. They were becoming less difficult. A strange realization. I felt more human inside this diner than I had inside my corporate headquarters. The thought unsettled me. Lily carried her coloring book toward the counter. A photograph slipped from between the pages and landed on the floor. I bent to pick it up. The image showed Marcus wearing military camouflage beside several other service members. Sand, sunlight, dust. Everyone looked younger, stronger, focused. Marcus reached for the photograph immediately. Not rude. Just quick. Sorry, I said. He studied the picture briefly before sliding it back into the book. Old photo. That was all. No explanation. No story. Lily looked proud though. Dad was a hero. Marcus sighed quietly. Lily. She grinned and returned to packing her crayons. The moment passed. Yet something lingered. Hero. The word did not seem to embarrass him. It seemed to bore him. That was unusual. Most people who had accomplished extraordinary things found subtle ways to mention them. Marcus seemed determined to hide them. Another puzzle piece. Another contradiction. Near 1 o'clock, Marcus flipped a sign near the register. Closing soon. The remaining customers drifted out into the wet night. The diner became quieter. Bigger somehow. The kitchen sounds faded. The hum of the refrigerators became noticeable. I watched rainwater slide down the windows. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. I nodded. When was the last time you had dinner with someone who was not trying to get something from you? The question landed harder than any headline. I opened my mouth. Closed it again. Then I realized I genuinely did not know. Investors wanted contracts. Executives wanted promotions. Journalists wanted quotes. Partners wanted leverage. Even friendships often came attached to opportunities. The answer took too long. Marcus noticed that too. He simply nodded. No judgment. Just understanding. Somehow that felt worse. Or maybe better. I was not sure anymore. Lily suddenly pointed toward the window. Dad? Marcus followed her gaze. A black SUV had pulled across the street. Its headlights remained on. The vehicle did not move. Neither did the man sitting behind the wheel. Marcus studied it for several seconds. Then his expression changed for the first time all night. Marcus kept his eyes on the SUV for several more seconds. The headlights remained fixed on the diner windows. Rainwater glistened across the hood. The driver never stepped out. Lily closed her crayon box and moved closer to the counter. She seemed used to reading her father's face. That caught my attention. Do you know him? I asked. Marcus shook his head. No. The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Then he grabbed a set of keys from beneath the register. Lily, go get your backpack. She obeyed immediately. No complaints. No questions. The atmosphere inside the diner shifted. Not panic. Awareness. The kind that comes from experience. I watched Marcus walk toward the front window. He adjusted the blinds slightly and looked outside again. The SUV still had not moved. A few moments later, the driver's door opened. A man stepped onto the sidewalk holding an umbrella. Relief hit me instantly. I recognized him. That is Daniel. Marcus glanced toward me. Friend? I laughed softly. Former attorney. Daniel crossed the street and entered the diner. The bell above the door rang sharply. Rainwater dripped from his umbrella onto the floor. He spotted me immediately. "Victoria!" His voice carried genuine concern. I had almost forgotten what that sounded like. He approached quickly. "I have been looking everywhere." Marcus remained near the counter, observing. Daniel loosened his tie and sat across from me. Exhaustion showed beneath his eyes. "The board filed 3 more motions tonight," he said. "News outlets are already reporting additional allegations." My stomach tightened. "What allegations?" Daniel hesitated. That pause told me enough. "Financial misconduct." The words landed heavily. Several customers might have stared. I did not notice. Marcus quietly continued stacking coffee mugs. Lily sat on a stool nearby, pretending not to listen. Daniel lowered his voice. "Someone is building a case against you." "Someone?" I asked. "Or everyone?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I do not know yet." Rain tapped steadily against the windows. The diner suddenly felt colder. A few hours earlier I had been angry. Now something else emerged. Concern. Real concern. Not for my reputation. For the company. Bennett Mobility employed thousands of people. Families depended on those jobs. If panic spread, contracts could collapse. Daniel seemed to read my thoughts. "The stock dropped another 12%. I closed my eyes briefly. 12%. One day. The numbers moved through my mind automatically. Factories. Drivers. Maintenance crews. Software. Teams. Entire communities connected to those figures. Marcus walked over carrying fresh coffee. He placed a mug beside Daniel without interrupting. Daniel looked up. "Thank you?" Marcus nodded once and returned to the counter. Another small act. Another detail. He never inserted himself into the conversation. Yet somehow he always improved it. Daniel opened a folder from his briefcase. Several documents slid across the table. "There is something else." His expression changed. More serious. "The compliance token." My attention sharpened immediately. The final transportation authorization key. The one nobody should have been able to access without me. "What about it?" Daniel leaned closer. "The board cannot activate it." My pulse quickened. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. "Why?" He stared directly at me. "Because someone altered the security structure 6 months ago." I froze. 6 months ago. I had not touched the system. Daniel continued. "Whoever did it made you the only person who can authorize the next stage." For several seconds neither of us spoke. The realization spread slowly. The board had removed me. They had frozen my life. They had turned the city against me. Yet the most important operational key in the company still depended on me. Across the diner, Marcus watched quietly. Not curious. Measuring. Understanding. Then Daniel opened the final page in the folder, and everything became even more complicated. Daniel slid the final page across the table. The paper looked ordinary. White. Clean. Quiet. Yet my eyes locked onto one line immediately. Authorization override created 6 months prior. I read it twice. Then a third time. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. That always happened when something serious appeared. Panic wasted energy. Details mattered. Facts mattered. "I did not create this," I said. Daniel nodded. "I know." The certainty in his voice caught my attention. He pointed toward a section near the bottom. "The timestamp proves it." I leaned closer. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The diner seemed to disappear around me. There it was. A digital signature. Not mine. Not even close. Someone had entered the system, using executive credentials, and built a security layer around the compliance token. Whoever did it knew exactly how the infrastructure worked. My stomach tightened. That was not random sabotage. That was planning. Months of planning. Daniel lowered his voice. "There is more." I looked up. The security logs were erased. Completely? Almost. Almost. A dangerous word. It meant something survived. Daniel tapped another page. A fragment remained. Marcus carried a tray of clean dishes toward the kitchen. He did not interrupt. Yet I noticed he slowed slightly when he passed our booth. Listening without appearing to listen. Another skill. Another detail. Daniel continued. The fragment points to an internal device. Whose? He hesitated again. The answer was already visible on his face. Ethan Cole. My former chief financial officer. The same man who had walked past me outside headquarters without stopping. For a moment the diner grew very still. Even the refrigerator hums seemed distant. Ethan had worked beside me for 8 years. He attended family holidays. Celebrated company milestones. Sat 3 feet away during executive meetings. Trust collapsed differently than business. Business hurt the mind. Betrayal hurt memory. Suddenly dozens of conversations replayed themselves in my head. Small comments. Strange timing. Tiny inconsistencies. Pieces I had ignored because success often teaches people to trust results more than instincts. Lily looked up from her book. She sensed the tension even if she did not understand it. Marcus walked over and placed a slice of pie in front of her. Late night bonus. Lily smiled instantly. The mood around her softened. Marcus returned to the counter. Daniel watched him for a second. Your friend seems observant. I almost corrected him. Friend felt too large for someone I had met only hours ago. Yet the word did not sound entirely wrong. He notices things, I said. Daniel nodded. Good. Another pause followed. Then he leaned forward. Victoria, there is something else you need to know. The words felt heavier this time. Go ahead. He glanced toward the diner entrance before speaking. Someone has been tracking your movements. Since you left headquarters. A cold sensation moved through my chest. Not fear exactly. Awareness. The SUV? Daniel nodded. Possibly. I looked toward the dark window. The vehicle remained across the street. Headlights still on. Engine still running. Waiting. Marcus followed my gaze. Then he quietly stepped outside. The bell above the door rang once. Cool night air drifted inside. I watched through the glass. Marcus crossed the sidewalk with calm, steady steps. Not aggressive. Not cautious. Just deliberate. The driver noticed him immediately. A brief conversation followed. Too far away to hear. 30 seconds. Maybe less. Then Marcus returned. Water glistened on his shoulders. He closed the door and removed his jacket. Daniel looked at him. Everything okay? Marcus hung the jacket on a hook. The driver works for a private investigations company. My attention sharpened. How do you know? Marcus picked up a coffee pot. He told me. Silence followed. Daniel blinked. I blinked. Marcus simply refilled a cup as if discussing the weather. Then he added one final sentence. He said somebody paid a lot of money to find you. Then Marcus looked directly at me for the first time that night. The name he gave was not Ethan. The name hit me harder than Ethan's ever could have. Marcus set the coffee pot down gently. Daniel straightened in his seat. Even Lily looked up from her coloring book. Who? I asked. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel. Richard Bennett. For a second I thought I had heard him wrong. Then the silence confirmed it. Richard Bennett. My uncle. My father's younger brother. The man who owned a small percentage of the company. The man who spent years smiling through board meetings and holiday dinners. The man who always claimed family mattered more than business. Daniel's face lost color. That is impossible. Marcus shrugged slightly. That is the name the driver gave. Rain slid down the windows in long silver lines. My thoughts raced through years of memories. Richard attending company anniversaries. Richard shaking hands with investors. Richard standing beside me at my father's funeral. A strange detail surfaced. 6 months ago. The same time. The security override appeared. 6 months ago was also when Richard suddenly became interested in attending executive strategy sessions. At the time it seemed harmless. Now it felt different. Daniel opened his folder again. His fingers moved quickly across several pages. Richard had no authority over the compliance system. Maybe not directly, I said quietly. But he knew everyone who did. The realization settled heavily between us. Marcus listened without interrupting. He never rushed conversations. He let people arrive at truths on their own. That was becoming easier to recognize. Lily climbed onto a stool near the register. Dad? She asked softly. Are they in trouble? Marcus looked at her for a moment. They are trying to understand something. Lily accepted the answer and returned to her drawing. Another small lesson. Another small act of parenting. Daniel rubbed his forehead. If Richard is involved, then this is bigger than a boardroom fight. I nodded. Much bigger. The diner felt unusually quiet. Somewhere in the kitchen a refrigerator hummed steadily. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. Outside, the SUV remained parked across the street. Watching. Waiting. For the first time all night, I stopped thinking about what I had lost. I started thinking about why it had happened. Those were very different questions. Daniel closed the folder. You need a safe place to stay. I almost laughed. That list is shorter than it used to be. He did not smile. Neither did I. The truth was not funny. Daniel checked his watch. Nearly 2 in the morning. I can arrange a hotel. With what account? I asked. He hesitated. Exactly. Most of my resources had vanished overnight. Marcus carried a stack of plates toward the kitchen. Then he stopped. There is an apartment upstairs. Daniel and I looked at him. Above the diner? Marcus nodded. Small. Nothing special. Lily grinned. The couch is terrible. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. The couch is fine. Lily shook her head dramatically. It squeaks. For the first time in hours, laughter entered the room. Brief. Quiet. Real. Marcus looked at me. You can stay there for a few days. The offer stunned me. We barely knew each other. Yet there it was. Simple. Direct. No conditions. No contract. No leverage. Daniel stared at him. Are you sure? Marcus answered immediately. Yes. No speech followed. No explanation. Just certainty. I looked toward the window. My reflection stared back from the dark glass. Former CEO. Public scandal. Homeless by midnight. Saved by a waiter who barely spoke and a little girl with a box of crayons. Life had become impossible to predict. Marcus picked up the apartment key from a hook near the register and placed it on the counter. Then he returned to cleaning tables as if nothing important had happened. But something had. Because for the first time since leaving headquarters, I was no longer facing the night alone. Then Daniel noticed something hidden inside Richard's file. Daniel pulled a folded sheet from the back of the file. It had been tucked between financial reports and legal notices. Easy to miss. Maybe intended to be missed. He opened it slowly beneath the diner lights. The paper crackled in the silence. Marcus stopped wiping the counter. Even Lily looked up. Daniel scanned the page once. Then again. His expression tightened. What is it? I asked. He slid the document toward me. At first glance it looked like an ordinary meeting agenda. Then I saw the date. 6 months earlier. The same week the security override had been created. My eyes moved down the list of attendees. Board members. Executives. Outside consultants. Then one name stopped me cold. Richard Bennett. Directly beneath it sat another name. Someone who had officially resigned nearly a year ago. Someone who should not have been involved in company operations at all. The room seemed quieter with every line I read. Why would she be there? I whispered. Daniel shook his head. That is exactly the question. Rain continued sliding down the windows. The SUV across the street remained parked. Watching. Waiting. I folded the document carefully. For the first time all night, a pattern was beginning to emerge. Not a complete picture. Just edges. Enough to know this was never about one board vote. Someone had been building this for months. Maybe longer. Marcus poured coffee into a fresh mug and placed it beside me. He never asked what was on the paper. That restraint felt unusual. Most people chased information. Marcus seemed interested only in what mattered. You should sleep soon, he said. I almost laughed. Sleep felt impossible. My company was collapsing. My uncle might be involved. Unknown investigators were tracking me. Yet somehow the simple statement carried weight. Daniel glanced toward the clock. Nearly 3 in the morning. Exhaustion settled into my bones. I had been running on adrenaline since dawn. Marcus pointed toward a narrow staircase near the kitchen. Apartment is upstairs. Lily smiled. There are extra blankets. Marcus sighed softly. Thank you, Lily. She grinned. You forgot to mention them. Another tiny exchange. Another reminder of the life they had built together. Simple. Honest. Real. Daniel gathered his papers into the folder. I will start digging into this meeting. He paused. And I will find out why Richard hired investigators. I nodded. He stood and adjusted his jacket. Try to get some rest. We both knew rest would be difficult. Still, the suggestion felt kind. Daniel left a few moments later. The bell above the door rang once. Then he disappeared into the wet darkness. The diner suddenly felt much larger. Emptier. Marcus locked the front door and switched off several lights. Shadows stretched across the booths. The red neon glow outside became softer. Warmer. Lily carried her backpack toward the staircase. Halfway there she stopped and looked back at me. You know, she said, Dad always helps people. Marcus gave her a look. She continued anyway. But he usually does not let them stay upstairs. A brief silence followed. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. Lily. She smiled innocently and continued climbing the stairs. I looked at Marcus. She says exactly what she thinks. Most days. He collected the last coffee mugs from the tables. Then he nodded toward the staircase. Get some sleep. I picked up the apartment key. It felt surprisingly heavy in my hand. Not because of metal. Because of trust. Hours earlier I had lost access to everything I owned. Now a stranger was handing me a place to stay. As I stepped toward the stairs, my eyes caught something mounted on the wall beside the kitchen entrance. A framed photograph. Military uniforms. Desert sunlight. Several service members standing shoulder to shoulder. Marcus was among them. Younger. Leaner. Focused. And the metal pinned to his chest was one I immediately recognized. Then I looked at Marcus differently. I stood in front of the photograph longer than I intended. The frame was simple. Nothing expensive. Nothing dramatic. Yet the metal on Marcus's uniform was unmistakable. I had spent years attending military charity events and veterans fundraisers. I knew what I was looking at. Not because of television. Because I had shaken hands with recipients before. People usually displayed those honors proudly. Entire rooms were often built around them. Marcus had placed his on a wall beside a kitchen doorway where customers barely noticed it. That told me more than the medal itself. You should get some sleep, Marcus said again. His voice pulled me back to the present. I glanced toward him. You never mentioned your service. He continued stacking plates. You never asked? Fair answer. I almost smiled. Then I carried the apartment key upstairs. The staircase creaked softly beneath each step. The apartment was exactly what Marcus promised. Small. Clean. Simple. A couch. A bookshelf. A narrow kitchen. Family photographs sat on a shelf near the window. Lily smiling at a school event. Lily holding a fishing pole. Lily missing several front teeth while laughing at the camera. The photographs felt alive. Honest. I sat on the couch. It squeaked immediately. Lily had been right. For the first time all day, silence surrounded me. No reporters. No executives. No ringing phones. Just the distant hum of refrigeration from below and rain tapping softly against the roof. I should have slept. Instead, my thoughts returned to Richard. To Ethan. To the mysterious meeting. To the investigators. Every answer seemed to create two new questions. Eventually exhaustion won. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight filled the apartment. Bright. Golden. Warm. For a moment I forgot everything. Then reality returned. I sat up quickly. The couch squeaked again. Downstairs, I could hear dishes clinking and voices talking. Morning had already begun. I washed my face and headed downstairs. The smell reached me halfway down the staircase. Fresh coffee. Pancakes. Bacon. Normal life. A strange comfort. The diner was busier than the night before. Construction workers occupied one booth. A retired couple shared breakfast at another. Lily sat near the counter doing homework. Marcus moved between tables carrying plates with practiced efficiency. He noticed me immediately. Morning. Morning. A cup of coffee appeared in front of me before I even sat down. I thanked him. He nodded and continued working. No speeches. No awkwardness. Just coffee. Lily waved. The couch squeaks, right? I laughed. You were right. She looked very pleased with herself. Another customer called Marcus over. He responded instantly. Watching him work was interesting. Every movement had purpose. Every interaction mattered. Yet he never seemed rushed. Around 10 minutes later, the bell above the door rang. Daniel entered carrying a laptop bag and 2 folders. His expression told me he had not slept much either. He slid into the booth across from me. I found something. My pulse quickened immediately. Daniel opened the first folder. The executive who attended that meeting. I leaned forward. What about her? He turned the page around. A photograph stared back at me. Recognition came instantly. No. Daniel nodded. Yes. The woman had officially resigned 11 months earlier. Publicly. Quietly. Everyone believed she had moved overseas. Yet financial records showed something entirely different. Multiple payments. Private consulting contracts. Hidden accounts. All connected to the same group of people. Richard. Ethan. Several board members. My stomach tightened. This was no longer speculation. It was structure. A network. Months of planning. Maybe years. Daniel lowered his voice. There is another problem. I looked up. He pointed toward the diner entrance. Someone had just walked inside. And the moment Marcus saw him, his expression changed again. The man who entered looked ordinary at first. Mid-50s. Gray. Jacket. Baseball cap. Nothing about him demanded attention. Yet Marcus stopped moving. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. Daniel noticed too. The diner continued humming around us. Plates clinked. Coffee poured. Customers talked. But a different current moved beneath the surface. The man removed his cap and approached the counter. Marcus met him halfway. Neither smiled. They exchanged a few quiet words I could not hear. Then the man handed over a large envelope. Thick. Unmarked. Marcus accepted it without opening it. The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. Still, something about it felt important. The visitor nodded toward Lily. She waved back happily. Then he left as quietly as he had arrived. The bell above the door rang once. The room returned to normal. Or tried to. Marcus placed the envelope beneath the counter and continued working. Daniel watched him carefully. "Friend?" he asked. Marcus shook his head. "Former teammate." That answer immediately caught my attention. Daniel leaned back slightly. "Military?" Marcus nodded once. No further explanation. Typical. Another customer requested a refill. Marcus handled it before returning to the counter. I glanced toward the hidden envelope. Questions piled up quickly. Yet something told me pushing would accomplish nothing. Marcus shared information when he chose to. Never sooner. Lily finished a math worksheet and slid it toward him. Marcus reviewed every answer seriously. The sight distracted me from my own problems for a moment. Then Daniel's phone vibrated. His eyes moved across the screen. Whatever he read immediately changed his expression. "Victoria!" My attention snapped back. "What happened?" He turned the phone toward me. Financial headlines filled the screen. Bennett Mobility stock had fallen another 18%. Trading analysts predicted further declines before market close. My stomach tightened. Not because of money. Money could return. Trust was harder. Thousands of employees depended on stability. Fear spread faster than facts. Daniel lowered his voice. "Regional managers are starting to panic." I looked out the window. Sunlight reflected off wet pavement. Somewhere across the city, people were making decisions based on lies. The thought sat heavily on my chest. Marcus quietly placed breakfast in front of a customer. Then another. The contrast felt impossible to ignore. One world measured value through stock prices. The other measured it through hot meals and homework assignments. For the first time, I wondered which system was actually stronger. Daniel closed his phone. "There is another issue." I almost laughed. Every hour seemed to deliver a new one. "Go ahead." "Lily's school." The words surprised me. Marcus looked up immediately. Daniel continued carefully. "I received a message from someone connected to the scholarship board." Marcus became very still. That alone told me enough. This mattered. Daniel folded his hands. "The scholarship review was moved forward unexpectedly." Lily looked between the adults. Confused. Marcus remained calm. "Why?" Daniel hesitated. "Anonymous complaints." Silence followed. My pulse quickened again. Anonymous complaints. The phrase felt familiar. Too familiar. Reputations rarely collapsed on their own. They were pushed. Directed. Managed. Marcus glanced toward Lily before speaking. "What kind of complaints?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. "Questions about family stability. Financial circumstances. Residency records." Lily lowered her eyes toward her homework. My chest tightened unexpectedly. She was only a child. Marcus reached over and rested a hand on her shoulder. Nothing dramatic. Just reassurance. Yet the gesture carried more strength than most speeches I had heard in boardrooms. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Someone is trying to make sure she loses that scholarship." Then Marcus finally reached beneath the counter and pulled out the envelope. Marcus placed the envelope on the counter. Nobody spoke for a moment. The diner sounds seemed distant. Lily sat quietly beside her homework. Daniel leaned forward. I could see questions forming behind his eyes. Marcus opened the envelope carefully. Inside were several documents and a flash drive. Nothing dramatic. Just paper and plastic. Yet his expression changed slightly as he scanned the first page. "What is it?" I asked. Marcus handed the document to Daniel. Daniel read it once. Then again. His eyebrows rose. "This cannot be right." My pulse quickened. He slid the paper across the counter toward me. The heading carried the name of Lily's Scholarship Foundation. Beneath it sat a list of internal communications. Anonymous complaints. Review requests. Financial inquiries. Every complaint originated from the same consulting group. The same group connected to Richard's hidden meetings. For a second I simply stared. Lily's scholarship was never the target. It was leverage. Pressure. A way to force Marcus into something. Why would they care about a school scholarship? I asked quietly. Daniel looked toward Marcus. Marcus remained calm. Too calm. Then Daniel found the answer. His finger stopped beside a line near the bottom of the page. Board Security Consultant Recommendation. My stomach tightened. Security Consultant? Marcus finally spoke. 3 years ago, Bennett Mobility offered me a position. I looked at him. Completely stunned. What? He folded his arms. I declined. The room seemed to tilt slightly. A dozen questions arrived at once. Marcus noticed. One of your executives approached me after a veterans conference. I searched my memory. Thousands of meetings. Thousands of names. Nothing surfaced. Marcus continued. The position involved logistics security and infrastructure protection. Suddenly everything connected. The military experience. The discipline. The way he noticed details. The way he handled pressure. Daniel looked equally surprised. You never told me this. Marcus shrugged. Nobody asked? Lily smiled. Dad never talks about himself. That statement felt painfully accurate. I thought about the past 24 hours. Marcus had fed me. Protected my privacy. Offered me a place to stay. Yet he had never once mentioned any accomplishment. Not one. Another realization followed. The people attacking me understood exactly who Marcus was. They knew his background. They knew his strengths. And now they were targeting his daughter. A cold anger settled inside me. Different from the anger I felt toward Richard. Cleaner. Sharper. Lily had done nothing wrong. Daniel plugged the flash drive into his laptop. Files appeared instantly. Hundreds of messages. Meeting notes. Financial records. Hidden transfers. His eyes widened. Victoria! I moved beside him. The evidence was overwhelming. Dates matched. Payments matched. Names matched. Richard's network suddenly looked very real. Very organized. Very vulnerable. Daniel scrolled through another folder. Then another. This is enough to expose everything. I should have felt relieved. Instead, my attention drifted toward Lily. She sat drawing quietly while adults discussed investigations, conspiracies, and corporate betrayal. Marcus noticed where I was looking. Our eyes met briefly. No words. None were needed. For the first time since losing my company, the decision felt obvious. This was no longer about restoring my reputation. It was about protecting people who deserved better. Daniel saved several backup copies immediately. Practical. Smart. Necessary. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced down. His expression changed. Not fear. Not surprise. Something else. He slowly turned the screen toward me. A breaking news alert filled the display. Someone had just scheduled an emergency board announcement for that afternoon. And Richard Bennett would be leading it. The alert remained on Daniel's phone long after the screen dimmed. Richard Bennett would lead the emergency announcement at 3 o'clock. Less than 4 hours away. Around us, customers continued eating breakfast. Coffee cups clinked. Conversations drifted through the diner. Nobody knew a corporate war was unfolding from a corner booth beside the window. I stared at the evidence spread across the table. For the first time since being forced out, I was not reacting. I was planning. The difference mattered. Daniel organized the files into separate folders. Financial transfers. Internal communications. Consultant agreements. Hidden payments. Every category told the same story. Coordination. Preparation. Deception. Marcus watched quietly while refilling coffee for customers. He never inserted himself into the discussion. Yet somehow his presence kept the room steady. Lily finished her homework and packed it into her backpack. Then she slid into the booth beside me. Are you going to be okay? She asked. The question caught me off guard. No reporter had asked that. No executive had asked that. No board member had asked that. Only a 10-year-old girl. I looked at her and answered honestly. I think I am getting there. She nodded as if that was enough. Then she returned to drawing. Marcus glanced toward us briefly. A small moment. A meaningful one. Daniel closed another folder. The announcement changes everything. I nodded. Richard believes he already won. Daniel looked toward the files. Not for much longer. The confidence sounded different this time. Not hopeful. Certain. We had proof now. Real proof. The kind that survives scrutiny. The kind that survives lawyers. My attention returned to the flash drive. Months of lies sat inside that tiny piece of plastic. Months of planning. Months of manipulation. All designed to remove me while protecting the people behind it. Outside, sunlight reflected from the wet pavement. The storm had finally passed. Marcus approached the booth carrying a fresh pot of coffee. What happens next? He asked. The question surprised me. It was the first time he had directly entered the conversation. I looked at the files. Then at Daniel. Then at Lily. We tell the truth. Marcus nodded once. No speeches. No dramatic reaction. Just approval. Daniel checked his watch. We need to move quickly. He began making calls immediately. One attorney. Then another. Then a journalist he trusted. Every minute mattered now. The momentum had shifted. I could feel it. Not because I was regaining power. Because facts were finally catching up to lies. Lily suddenly pointed toward the television above the counter. Look. Everyone turned. A financial network had already begun discussing the upcoming announcement. Richard's photograph filled the screen. Confident smile. Expensive suit. Calm posture. The same image the public always saw. I recognized it instantly. It was the face of a man who believed control was permanent. The anchor described him as a stabilizing force for the company. Daniel laughed quietly. That description will age badly. Even Marcus allowed the smallest hint of a smile. Then my phone vibrated. Not the disabled company phone. My personal backup phone. The one almost nobody knew existed. The screen displayed a single message from an unknown number. No greeting. No explanation. Just one sentence. I read it once. Then again. My pulse slowed. The message said, "Check your father's safety deposit box before 3 o'clock." The message stayed on my screen while the diner noise faded into the background. Daniel read it twice. Marcus glanced over my shoulder. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Daniel stood. We are going. 15 minutes later we were driving across the city. Rain clouds had broken apart. Sunlight flashed across glass buildings and wet streets. The bank sat downtown inside one of the oldest towers in the city. My father had trusted institutions that survived generations. Walking through those doors felt like stepping into a memory. The manager recognized me immediately. Her expression shifted when she saw me. Sympathy. Concern. Curiosity. Probably all three. She led us downstairs without asking questions. The safety deposit box waited inside a small private room. My hands felt steady as I unlocked it. Strange. 24 hours earlier I had been losing everything. Now I felt calmer than I had in years. Inside the box sat a single envelope. Thick. Sealed. My father's handwriting covered the front. My breath caught. Daniel closed the door behind us. Marcus remained silent. I opened the envelope carefully. Several documents slid onto the table. At the top sat a signed letter. The date stunned me. It had been written almost a year earlier. My father had known something. I began reading. Every line pulled another piece into place. Richard's name appeared repeatedly. So did the names of several board members. My father had discovered irregular financial activity before his death. He had launched a private investigation. More importantly, He had documented everything. Account numbers, internal communications, witness statements, backup copies. The evidence from the flash drive had been powerful. This made it undeniable. Daniel stared at the pages. This ends it. He was right. It did. My father had anticipated exactly what might happen if the wrong people gained control. The final page contained a handwritten note addressed specifically to me. The ink had faded slightly, but the words remained clear. Trust character more than titles. Protect people before profits. The rest will follow. I read the sentence twice, then folded the page carefully. For a moment nobody spoke. The room felt smaller, quieter, as if my father had briefly stepped back into it. Daniel checked the time. Less than 30 minutes remained before the announcement. We moved quickly. Attorneys received copies. Journalists received copies. Regulators received copies. Every file went out simultaneously. No delays. No opportunities to bury anything. By the time we returned to the diner, televisions across the country were already carrying breaking news alerts. The emergency announcement had begun. Customers gathered around the screen. Richard stood behind a podium. Calm. Confident. Prepared. Then his expression changed. The first question arrived. Then another. Then 3 more. Journalists cited documents. Investigators confirmed evidence. Financial records appeared on screen. The confidence disappeared from his face one piece at a time. Nobody celebrated inside the diner. Nobody cheered. Marcus simply continued pouring coffee. Daniel quietly closed his laptop. Lily colored another picture. Life moved forward. Hours later, the board voted unanimously to restore my position. Public statements followed. Investigations expanded. Truth finally reached daylight. Yet standing inside that diner, none of it felt like the most important victory. I looked toward Marcus. A waiter. A father. A veteran. A man who had every reason to stay uninvolved. Instead, he chose kindness. I looked toward Lily. Her scholarship had already been reinstated. She smiled when she caught me watching, then returned to her drawing. Sunlight streamed through the front windows. Warm. Golden. Quiet. 24 hours earlier I had believed success meant power. Now I understood something different. Sometimes the people who change your fate are the ones who never ask for credit. And that was enough.